Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today on Voice of Olympus, I am proud to bring you Living Theurgy. We have with us today a wonderful panel of theurgists. We have Tony Mierzwicki, we have Clio Ajana, we have Brandy Williams, and we have the one and only Apollonius. And today we're going to share tales of exciting things that have been happening to us recently. And we will start with Tony Mierzwicki. Greetings, sir. I hear you had many adventures with another theurgist lately.
Susan and I did indeed. We had the pleasure of hosting Jean-Louis and his beautiful wife, Patricia. They stayed with us for a couple of nights. We managed to get in a lot of conversation. We took them to Hollywood Forever Cemetery last Friday, which they really enjoyed. And after that, I went off with them to the Getty Villa, which I particularly really enjoy. They have an example of a curse tablet. There's an Orphic gold tablet and loads of statues, loads and loads of incredible things. So it was wonderful actually hosting him. We have Pagan Pride Day coming up in early October. I'll be giving a talk. I presented them with two options. They haven't gotten back to me about which one they want to take. So it's either going to be Atlantis and Poseidon or a basic talk on psychic self-defense and psychic vampirism. Jean-Louis is actually applying to talk at the same event. So he's put in an application and, fingers crossed that he does get in. It is a fair drive for him, but it'd be good for him to sort of spread himself out a little bit more. But that's all still very much up in the air, and we'll see what happens over the next 3 weeks. I don't know if I should keep talking about other workshops that I have coming up or not. Okay, in November, between the 10th and the 12th, there's going to be an event called Symposium Chthoniya. And over the last 2 years, that is in 2021 and 2022, it was held in Massachusetts. So it's an event that features a number of authors. And this year it's going to have a strong underworld focus, especially on Hecate. So they asked me to put on 2 workshops for that. So one's going to be a fairly general workshop on venerating ancient Greek deities. So I'm going to be looking at how the deities were venerated in ancient Greece, both in the home and in public events, and then give ideas as to how they can be venerated in our modern society. The second talk that they want me to give is on Hecate. So when most people think of Hecate, they think of her as being a dark and malevolent goddess connected to witchcraft and baneful magic. However, as we know, she possesses a benevolent function as well. So you go through the Chaldean oracles, you go through the writings of Hesiod, and she's portrayed as a savior figure and a world soul figure. So I just wanted to explore her multifaceted nature so people can gain a deeper understanding of her and the potential benefits of honoring and venerating her in this day and age. So that's going to be in November. So they're the 2 events that I have coming up, and I'm quite looking forward to both of them. So like I said, this year it's going to be in Los Angeles, just up the road from where we are.
That is incredibly awesome. Thank you so very much. Anybody have any questions to ask Tony before we move on to Cleo?
Well, actually, Tony, I did have a question because I'm now excited about this. Do they plan to continue rotating it? Like, will it go back to Massachusetts in the future, or will it still be wherever the focus is?
I honestly don't know. The guy who puts it on contacted me about it last year because I spent 3 months in New York City last year, and he told me that it was going to be held on the East Coast in Massachusetts, and he suggested that I could possibly come along to it. And then he contacted me a few months ago and he said that they were going to try holding it in Los Angeles. And he asked me if I'd like to be involved. And, I thought about it for a millisecond before saying yes, because it sounds really exciting. You've got a number of authors sharing their insights on working with Hecate and various aspects of the underworld. So it should be a very pleasant event. So I suppose whether it stays here in Los Angeles or goes back to Massachusetts depends on how successful it is. So fingers crossed that it stays here in LA. That'll be much easier for me. But if I get the bug, I'd probably go to Massachusetts for it next year if they decided to move it back.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
And Clio, you've had some exciting things happening and about to happen as well. Would you care to share?
Sure. This is, very nice to be at home and not traveling. I've been traveling probably about a couple of times a month for something for the past 8 months, and it's just nice to be sitting in one place. So I just was recently at the Parliament of the World Religions in Chicago, and I was a part of an Earth Traditions presentation called The Goddess Speaks. I wrote about it for the Wild Hunt, but I want to share that I really enjoyed the entire conference or convening as much as I could. There are very few places I've ever been where I can honestly say I've only seen like maybe 1% of what it had to offer because it was so huge. The McCormick Center is such a big place. I had been to Chicago before, but I had not been to the McCormick Center. I got my steps in very nicely just from the space of it getting there. And they put a lot of pagan presentations on at the same time. It is, of course, very difficult to organize and corral 8 to 10,000 people, which is what you had there at any given time. So from the sacred music offerings, which were on Thursday night, they gave an award to Jesse Jackson. It was nice seeing him in person, such as it was, and hearing the different music, seeing so many different groups of people, having amazing conversations at the Lungar, spelled Langar, but pronounced Lungar, with the Sikh or Sikh, depending on, these were from London and Birmingham, UK, coming over. And that was probably one of the best lunches. I kind of knew what to expect, but it was just very nice. And you didn't know who to meet. So I met Indian religious poets and Jain and practitioners. I sort of met for like 5 minutes a fellow numerologist, but he was an Indian numerologist, and I didn't have that much time to talk to him because he was with his parents and showing his parents around. They had crowning ceremonies in the red tent. They had a whole section devoted just to women. They had all these yurts. I love yurts. I think they're amazing. We should all live in yurts if we could. It's too cold where I am, but if I could, that's where I'd live, would be in a yurt. And they had a set of 4 of them with a lot of sound balancing and things like that, plus a number of presentations. The one that I happened to be fortunate to participate in, The Goddess Speaks, there were 12 goddesses. It could have been summarized as climate change. It's here, it's happening. Here's what the goddesses have to say to you. And a lot of them are really ticked off. And so I happen to have Gaia. We had Hecate, we had Demeter, pretty much anyone, and each person got to first divine with the assistance of their particular deity, what was needed to be said, and we got to interact with the audience while someone else was reading it because we had masks, and the masks have no depth perception, so it was, you had to keep your fingers crossed and reach out for a hand to make sure you didn't collapse on the floor. That was my one fear, was that I would walk and fall, because it's hard to wear a gown, wear a mask, no depth perception, and also be focused as the goddess is channeled through you. And Gaia wanted to stare at everybody a lot because she wanted people to know she was serious, quite serious. And it was probably one of the best experiences I've had in a very long time. I was so grateful for it. And the people who came were thrilled. And that was the other thing. the one thing I noticed about the parliament, the schedule kept changing and the app wasn't always working. So people didn't know where they were going. And so we got people to come in who they intended to go to something else entirely different, and they just happened to end up there. So that to me was wonderful. It was really a good expression. I think it demonstrated and showcased all the good we do within the community, and there were no labels, which is so sweet. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. There was other stuff that you probably have seen, other articles and other recollections from different people. What I saw were lots of good people getting together and had to find new ways to describe what I did, because sometimes it's very confusing. There's still, sadly, a not full and clear understanding of those who practice some sort of earth tradition or pre-indigenous traditions of Europe or Asia or Africa. Although that will just get you with more questions, but in a very welcoming way than just simply saying pagan or heathen or polytheist. So that was my big part that I got from that. And did any of you go to the Parliament of the World Religions?
I went in 1993, and I was going to talk to that after you were finished talking.
Okay. Well, this was okay. There were some things happened that were, I'm sure, intra, because it was just among the groups. But I fortunately did not personally see anything that made us look bad as non-monotheist. So I go ahead and laugh. It's okay.
Oh,
you know,
it always happens. The Pantheon stories, my goodness.
well, I mean, it's when I go to something like that, I figure you're not just representing, especially for such a large grouping, 8,000 to 10,000 people. Most of them are not going to be doing anything close to what I'm actually doing. So I always have to remember that. And it's sort of like if you leave the country, you're representing not just your own little part, but the country and your nationality, and kind of behave accordingly. That's kind of how I look at it. And the nice thing was everyone I met pretty much seemed to have a similar sort of attitude and wanting to share their knowledge and share who they were and what they did or didn't do in a wonderful, loving way. Now, maybe a bit Pollyanna, but that's who I met. Those are the people I met. I'm sure somewhere there were people who are like, oh, so-and-so, that's a jerk. I didn't run into those people. Of course, I was not trying to run into those people. I should clarify that. I was not trying, I had my discreet stuff on. It did not do the bling factor where everything is blingy all over. I know some people love doing that. That's not really me. And what I really liked was how many times you could see something new and connect it to what's already being done. We just call it by a different name. And those were happening all over. And I loved. That was just amazing. So I don't know where they're going to go next time. I ended up giving a Rebbe a trip back to the airport to O'Hare. And and we had this wonderful conversation because she's over in York, UK, and normally would not fly to get back for that. And she had to get back for a ceremony. And so we went over how the changes and differences and how similar things are between two completely different religious traditions. She was Jewish, and what happens and why she thought it was important to show up for the Parliament of the World Religions. And probably my one regret is that I didn't see more people who identify somewhere around a pagan, polytheist, or heathen guidelines. I saw some, but not as many. And it seemed to be all sort of in one big mix. And then there are a few stragglers that I wish more people would go. If I'd known about it earlier, I probably would have been there. Not in 93, but the last one they had in the United States, I would have definitely gone if I'd known about it and been able to figure out how to afford it. Because that was the other thing that I thought was weird. The prices kept changing. I'm like, how can you have a 5-day event and the price literally changes from before you get there to day 1 to day 5? So that was, but I figured I don't know enough to know why that might have changed. All I knew was it was incredibly wonderful, and I needed several days to sleep afterwards, But yeah, but that, and next spring I'm going to be at fingers crossed this continues to hold, but I'll be at Sacred Space, back in my home country, so give me a chance to visit relatives. And in between, the only thing we have before then, stuff hasn't been confirmed. So yeah. And of course, spending time with you guys.
Thank you so very much. Does anybody have any questions to ask Clio before we move on to Brandy?
Yeah, I just wanted to I wanted to say, oh, go ahead. Somebody else go.
Oh no, you go first. I'll go after you.
We're always so polite. No, it was lovely to see that you had gone, and I saw that Otter Zell went and wrote about it. And Otter, in contrast to you, wore the full wizard outfit with the hat and the staff.
Yes.
He's very striking. But the interesting thing about 93 was that it's the first one. It was the first one after the 1893 Parliament, which was the first one. So I went to the centennial. So you all may know that in 1893, the big star was I've lost his name just now. Vivekananda, Swami Vivekananda, who came to the U.S. Specifically from India, and it's a huge story, an amazing story about how he managed to get the money for it and figure out how to do it. And he represented Hinduism, and he was the person who really brought understanding of Eastern religion as a religion to the rest of the world. So it's a really big moment. And then in 1893, there were only 3 pagan groups. There was Cog and Earth Spirit, and I don't remember the third one. And we were signatories to an agreement all of the religions made that we weren't going to go to war with each other over religion, which is a really important thing that would stop like a lot of wars. Not every religion has kept to it since 1993, but it was a great thing to see started. So it was really, I did a presentation called Wiccan Devotionals, and Sikhs came. They were kind of like a bunch of people lining up in the back of the room with turbans and knives, and they wanted to tell me how similar what they were doing was to what I was talking about, which was awesome. Yeah, and Don Fruit came and made a presentation, sort of a keynote presentation about what it meant to be pagan and Wiccan. So that was very exciting. Don is one of the people that I have interviewed recently for Witchcraft and Theurgy. And Clio, I think you're my most recent interview. So it's really good to have you there. So I'm so glad you went and represented, and it brings back a lot of memories.
And one thing I did want to add before getting to Tony was there was a presentation that I loved. And then I realized, you know what? We are not her audience. It was dealing with God, sex, and taboos. God, death, sex, and taboos. But it was wonderful because it clearly explained, going back by 3,000 years. She's like, well, yes, there's this shift from female to male. So from matriarchy and everything being to male. And when that happened, all of a sudden, here's what you saw. And when you look at it, you go, hadn't thought of it quite that way, but it made a lot of sense, down to the very fairy tales we tell our children. Why do you have, Snow White, and you have the stepmother, the evil stepmother, who of course is then called a witch and is giving the poison apple, okay? That sort of thing. And where does that come from? Or the idea of how purity, and how purity is restricted by gender. All that stuff came out, and it was absolutely fascinating. So I loved it, and I thought, and it's just one of the things you never know. So thank you for sharing that about the first one. I didn't know that, and that does explain a lot. And I wonder if we can re-sign that agreement not to go to war with each other over religion, because I don't know about you, but the last 10 or 20 years, it seems like a lot of people have been going to war over religion. So we need to re-sign or something. Sorry, Tony.
Clio, I just wanted to amplify a couple of things that you said. Unfortunately, I haven't been to the Parliament of World Religions, but I have been interested in it for a number of years. I was given some feedback after the Parliament that was held in Portugal. So that was roughly 15 years ago or so. And you were talking about discrimination. And from what I was told, everyone there in Portugal was happy with the pagans, except for 2 groups. Greek Orthodox and also the Baptists. So even the Catholics were okay with the pagans being there. And
yes.
the other thing I wanted to add was about the Sikhs, which both you and Brandy have spoken about. They have this charitable component to their religion.
Mm.
And in Portugal, they actually took over a space and they provided meals for all the poor people in the area. So it doesn't surprise me at all that they put on a scrumptious meal for everyone. It's part of their religion. There's supposed to be a Sikh temple in Huntington Beach, which is where I lived for the last 20 years.
Oh.
Unfortunately, I never wound up going to it, but apparently on Sundays, they have free meals for everyone. So they're a wonderful order.
Actually, yes, they I'd heard about that when they were in Europe, and how they did. In fact, they were so beloved that apparently the markets, when they figured out who they were and what they were doing, stopped charging them. And
Oh,
the cab
wow.
drivers stopped charging them because all they were doing is coming and getting stuff because they cook it. And it's very simple, wonderful. You don't even realize it's well, you realize it's vegetarian. You don't care it's vegetarian. It's great. And the one I'd gone to originally was at the next to the YMCA in New Delhi, India. They've got a huge temple, and they think nothing of having this. You just have to be willing to either sit down on a carpet, or if you are in need, to sit in a chair. And don't be afraid to sit in a chair. The other part was, I did hear about the thing with the Greek Orthodox, and the sad part was afterwards we did sort of redeem ourselves, so now it's okay, but it's taken a lot of work, sort of like, hey, we heard you sacrificed a goat in the park. Okay, that doesn't go over too well. Even if you did sacrifice the goat in the park, it doesn't go over too well if people don't understand why there might have been a goat sacrifice. So, and in this case, it didn't actually happen, but because it was reported, then the Greek Orthodox are like, well, I don't know. And that sort of has been, to me, it's taken years, as far as I could tell, because I heard about that and it was like, well, how long did it take, you know? And it's been quite some time. And finally it got straightened out. And
Greek-
that was, to me, it's sort of like the 2 steps forward and 1 step back. We just have to have one little bit of negative information about who we are, and then that kind of taints things, and then people have to see all the wonderful good things we do, and then all of a sudden it comes back and we're okay.
Well, I will
That's
tell
my
you, Clio,
frustration.
real fast, that the Greek Orthodox in 1993, before they had any personal experience with us, they were objecting to us and threatening to withdraw because witches were there. So if
Oh,
there was a
wow.
rumor after that, it wasn't what started the bad blood between the Greek Orthodox and witches in general, or that church and us. So I'm glad that we've made some progress, but it wasn't on us to start with.
That could have been neutralized. Greek people sacrificed the Paschal lamb. I remember when I lived in New York, Greeks were always getting in trouble around Easter time with the ASPCA and all sorts of other groups because they had lambs that they were raising, and then they killed the lambs for food on Easter time. So that could have been pointed out to them about this goat incident, that, you know, there's enough reports of the ASPCA that could have borne that out. So that was an issue that was a non-issue because they do the same thing.
Yeah.
And I did put, for those interested in the chat, that was my most recent posting on it. That was about Just the Goddess Speaks. I think the Wild Hunt's done like 4 or 5 things on it, different ones. So if anybody's interested. And Tony, the next time there is one coming up, let's go. And it'll probably be not in the United States. So I'm sure your passport's handy. Just, figure out the time. Kind of.
Yeah. I really would like to go. I've heard amazing things about it. Just every religion on the planet coming together. I've been told that you go into eating spaces and you could be talking to some ordinary looking person. They have a following of thousands and thousands of people. So yeah, lots of amazing people to meet and network with.
Thank you very much. We move on to Brandy now.
Tony, you organized a panel for us at PantheaCon. Maybe we can do a panel at one of the parliaments. That'd be really fun. Put the Greek Orthodox people together on a panel with us and see how that goes. Who could moderate that? I'm actually serious. That'd be awesome. Tony's like, I don't know.
I don't like to see the sight of blood, so
Oh, the 1993 Parliament, someone thought it was a bright idea to do a panel called Religions in Conflict, and that one ended in a near riot in the conference room.
Oh my God.
Yeah, there were a few bugs to work out in the early days of that event. Let's see, and while I'm talking to you too, Tony, Hecate, Jason Menke was once the editor of the Pathos Pagan channel, and he said anybody who ever wrote about Hecate, that was the most popular blog post. So put up a blog post for sure.
Of course.
Yeah. And I put in the chat a link to the blog post I made about Wiccan devotionals and revisiting that some years later. So there's some history in that too. I can't believe it's like 30 years since the 1993 Parliament. Oh my goodness. Time flies. All right. So what I'm doing, not much. I have cleared my calendar because I was going to do a presentation for the Ninefold Festival, and I realized that it was a presentation I hadn't made before, which meant I had to work it up, and that meant a lot of working up time. And when I'm really focusing on writing my next book, and it's being very very time consuming, and caregiving has also started to be a lot more time consuming. So I've dedicated any free time I have. I'm like, I gotta write the book, you guys. So that's what I'm doing. I cleared off the classes I was planning on doing. I'm just going to do the book. The one thing I'm doing is this kind of thing because it doesn't take a lot of effort to turn on a Zoom and talk to people. So this is great. I love living Theurgy. Witchcraft and Theurgy is a wonderful conversation. I plan to make a blog post after I've done that for a year and just make a collection of things. I always ask the question, what is a witch? What is Theurgy? And so I want to just write out what people's answers were. My favorite so far is Jason Menke's. He said, yeah, witchcraft is the flowering of the Western magical tradition. I said, right on. And I have a couple of things that are coming up. I taped an interview with Knit-a-Spell, so that should be up shortly, and I'll post a link on my blog when it on my website when it comes up. And Sixth Sense Society is doing a panel on magic, so I think it's on women in magic. So I'm going to go do that. So that's aside from writing, this is all I am doing, talking to people on Zoom. Oh, I did get a chance to Hercules was kind enough to interview me and my partner Alex, just to get him on camera. And Tony, I'm so sorry that our timing did not work out. We make it really hard for people to interview us. I said, what do you have in terms of 1 o'clock in the afternoon? That's his time. He's in the morning, he gets care, and then between 1 and 3 he is awake. He has enough energy to talk, and then after that he's just done. So it makes it really, really hard. But Hercules was able to meet the timing. I'm still hoping, Tony, that we can get together with you on your show as well. So I continue to work toward that.
Yeah, I would really like to do that. And
Yeah.
And I'm mindful of the 1 to 3 slots. So
I'm so sorry.
is there a particular day that works best for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We have to match schedules too because of all of his appointments. I mean, this is the first day this week that I haven't had something I've been doing, that hasn't involved him. So we'll do another round of scheduling.
Yes, indeed.
So that's it for me.
Thank you very much. Sandra, do you have any questions to ask Brandy?
Well, yes, if you could at some point, Brandy, say again, you're going to be you had 3 events that you're doing by Zoom. So I presume they're all listed and all that stuff. I just would be interested. That's all.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, actually, I think all of them are. I'm not sure. Sixth Sense Society may be live, but mostly we like this one. We record and then I put the link up on my website, brandywilliamsauthor.com. So just pay attention to that, or I can poke you a link when they go up.
Okay, sounds wonderful. I'd love that.
Thank you so much. Yep, I love that we pay attention to each other.
Yeah, me too. I like that about our group.
Hmm.
And last but not least, Apollonius.
Well, so I haven't had too much going on lately. As I think I mentioned last time, I've been putting some of my essays from 20 or almost 30 years ago together into a book, and so I've mostly for the past month been involved just in proofreading and editing and, book formatting types of activities. And I got that done. So that book, it's called Pythagorean Theology and the Esoteric Elements. And it, talks about all of the linkages between Pythagoreanism in the broad sense, the Orphic tradition, and the Bacchic mysteries and the Eleusinian mysteries, and also a lot of this also in terms of the esoteric elements with their four qualities. And in fact, there's quite a bit in there about Hecate. So you might want to check that out, Tony. There might be some interesting stuff you can put into your presentation.
I'd love to.
And
Yeah.
I'd like to request a review copy, and I'd love to interview you on it.
I'd be happy to do that. Yeah.
I'd also.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd also like to interview you. I'm interviewing Jean-Louis this month, but maybe I could go through the book for next month.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's good. Let me make a note of that. No, that'd be great. So yeah, it's stuff that I, like I said, I wrote a while ago, and it's been on the web, but I put in a little bit of additional information and some better figures and did quite a bit of editing on it to make a sort of a coherent package. And so that took a lot of time, but it's out now. It's paperback, hardback, and Kindle ebook. So I mean, when you got one, it's fairly easy to then produce the others. So beyond that, I'm working on a couple papers and a presentation I'll be doing in February, I believe, for WitchCon. And it'll be kind of based on the chapter of our Theurgy book. So it's basically how to put together a theurgical ritual in the Neoplatonic tradition. And so that's really probably my next big project now that I've got the book done. And that's probably about all for me. I kind of missed out on Pagan Pride Day this year, so I'll make a try for that next year because I do like to participate in that.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions to ask Apollonius? Clio.
Yeah, hi, Apollonius. So I remember looking up, and I think I remember asking you this at Mystic South, but you have some overlapping ones. So you've got the Pythagorean theology and esoteric elements. Is that hand in hand with the Pythagorean tarot, the interpretation, the reissue? Sorry, updated issue, not reissue.
Yeah.
And because it looks lovely when it's got a totally different cover. And then is one of those also CB's Path to Enlightenment? As another older one that these are all revamped now, right? With additional information.
Well, yes, that's right in a sense. Okay, so the Pythagorean Tarot I updated and reissued it as you said, with lots of additional illustrations and in color. So that's part of the difference from the original edition of the Pythagorean Tarot. It's consistent with the Pythagorean theology and esoteric elements. They cross-reference each other a little bit, but basically it's independent material. So in a sense, it's kind of a more theoretical, esoteric kind of background to the Pythagorean Tarot. That wasn't necessary for the tarot. Then Kebe's Path to Enlightenment, that's in a sense completely independent. So that was some material I had worked on years ago, but had never been published or put online before this book I produced. And what it is, it's an ancient text, Kebe's tablet, which is sort of a Pilgrim's Progress kind of thing. It's a very allegorical sort of story about the progress of the soul, and also how to live a philosophically enlightened life. But it's got a second layer of meaning, which is a more initiatory, esoteric layer of meaning. And so I published my translation of Kebe's tablet, and that's out there. But then Kebe's Path to Enlightenment includes that translation, but then it has an extensive commentary by me that goes chapter by chapter through the tablet of Kebe's and kind of explores the symbolism. It explores that second level of meaning, what's going on there in terms of the stages of initiation and things like that, and tries to make that a little bit clearer. And I also illustrated that too. It has a number of color illustrations in it, in addition to the ones I made for the tablet. So, but that is, I would say, yes, it's also consistent. They're sort of the same Pythagorean theology underneath it, but it's not. It's working more directly off of what's in the original text of Kebe's tablet, whereas the others are pulling together material from all sorts of sources, philosophical sources, historical sources, mythological sources, the whole sort of esoteric lore of alchemy and all of that stuff, and pulling it all together. That's what I do in the Pythagorean theology. So it's a synthesis, is what it attempts to be.
This is good and very helpful, because when I went to look for it, I think I told you when I saw you in July that I had just seen the Pythagorean Tarot, and then I saw this other one, like going, oh yes, it's great. So I'm looking forward to seeing what else you may be putting together, since it sounds like you're culling stuff, adding things after having mulled it over for 30 years. Then you can add more things to it. It has to, it's been in the crock pot of your, of your brain and heart.
Exactly.
That's how I look at it.
And you do change your mind and hopefully understand things better after a few decades too. So that's what I'm trying to do. The only ones that actually are duplications in a sense are that the Kebe's Path to Enlightenment includes the translation of the Tablet of Kebe's. So if you bought Kebe's Path to Enlightenment, there would be no reason to buy the Tablet of Kebe's. But if you don't want my commentary, keep it to myself kind of thing, then you can get just the straight translation too.
But I like commentary, because what I like about your interpretations, it took me a while. I started reading that because it's required for our group to have it, because we use the Pythagorean Tarot. And I didn't have a chance to tell you this before, but I remember getting that book and reading it when I first entered the craft, and that's been 16 years. And so I'm like, okay, yes, and going through it. And there's some things that you just don't get right away because you're not at that stage where it's relevant for you. And what I really like is that is a book and a deck that can grow with you, and you can grow with it, and you never get bored. This is not to say, for those watching, that there's something wrong with the Rider-Waite deck. It's incredibly complex, I think, just to any tarot deck, but there's some with a commentary where the commentary is this thick. That's something, as opposed to that little tiny little book that comes in. Then you got to figure out the little booklet. I kind of wish they all had, 500-page commentaries. Personally, that makes me happy. My heart sings when I see that. So bring it on. Please have more.
And I used, of course, a lot of those detailed commentaries in the Pythagorean Tarot too. I cite many of those, both some of the classics, the old classics, and some of the newer ones as well, especially ones that, kind of either talked about alchemical symbolism or Jungian psychology and those sorts of things, or were more numerologically focused. So we stand on the shoulders of giants.
Absolutely.
And you're the one building the ladder to reach the
I build a ladder for myself, and then I leave it around for other people to use too. I figure if it helps me, it helps them.
I have to say, Hercules, good.
No, you go first. It always seems to happen. We always cut each other off.
We do that, yeah.
No, you go first.
We have to start each show by asking Apollonius what book he's published this month.
Yes.
Pretty much.
That's why when he says he only did this, it's like, yeah, What,
only.
a year or two that you only did that. Anybody have any questions to ask Apollonius?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Cleo's words that when you first work with a particular text, you may think that you understand it all. So to have Apollonius revisiting material that he's mulled over for 30 years, that makes his insights absolutely priceless, because there's so much that he would have gleaned in that 30 years that you wouldn't get from just a straight translation. So I think Cleo's really onto something.
Thank you.
I'm going to rush mine so we have time to do, contact information. But generally, I'm in my 60s now. I've been doing the same thing since I was a teenager. My spiritual things are roughly in 4 categories: mythic spirituality, sometimes called heroic path, sometimes Olympian heroic path, sometimes Olympian shamanism. I call it different things at different times, but that's one branch. The other one is Theosophia. The other one is Theurgy, and then the cosmic stuff, which ranges from planetary magic to UFOs and everything in between. A lot of Theosophy and Theurgy blends into that, as well as mythology that's been emerging for a very long time. So as I get older and the mortality becomes more real, it's like, what do I want to do while I'm still here? Like, what would I like to leave the world? So a lot of people have asked me to codify the things I'm doing. Like, I do public lectures. They're kind of like 0 level, I guess. I got around 50 things that I talk about or I've talked about repeatedly throughout my life. So I have that information. Then I have, in each of these categories, I've done everything from workshops to, one-shots to classes to groups and so forth. So right now I started a Theosophy group. It's called Theosophia. In Greek, that means divine wisdom or divine insight. It's an esoteric studies group. It's in my home. I started it in the library, but the library, first because of COVID, we could meet there. Then we opened and they're doing renovations because they got a grant. So I'm doing it in my home now. And we meet once a month, the first Wednesday of the month in person. And then the third Wednesday of the month, we have a Zoom meeting for those who couldn't make it or live too far away or want to have the meeting a second time. So that's been progressing really well. We started a Facebook group and everybody decided that even though we're very eclectic, people wanted the Olympian mythos and also the Atlantean mythos, what we have in Atlantis, to be our group's mythos. So, I'm recontexting everything to fit into that framework. And the purpose of it isn't to teach people something specific or to give them answers to life's questions. It's to basically expose yourself to certain perspectives and know that there isn't really an answer. So we're going to be dealing with different topics to be considered theosophical, like angels, ascended masters, the 7 bodies within humanity, the planets, and things like that. But it'll be basically a sharing and developing a better understanding or bigger understanding. So that's the purpose of that. A lot of people like that when we do it in the libraries because they say they never get a chance to talk to anybody about these types of things. Occasionally I'll do one that deals with the paranormal also, and that attracts people. So with Theosophia, that's happening already. And after we move back to the libraries and the public meetings, the group that is in my home wants to do like esoteric type of stuff. So some of them have been with me before, some of them are Masons, some of them are Rosicrucians. There's a mixed bag of different folks. Some have mythical or monotheistic spiritualities, and theosophy is a good language to frame everything in. So it's going to be framed in theosophical language. But I'm doing something I used to call the Cave of Circe, or Kiki, as we call her in Greek. And it was inspired by the Arbatel, which I don't particularly like in so far as, it's like, aha, we defeated the Greek gods and now we're going to bully them. They can do anything they want, but it has to be under our approval. And anyway, that's a separate show. But some of the things in there, the structures they have in there, I found very useful. So we touch on all the different types of magic, everything from totemic magic to shamanism to theurgy, to what's being called now Hellenismos, that people do for Greek spirituality. And it's going to be like a book and some class and some study for each category that I'll be covering. So I've already introduced them to Brandy and her book in the Facebook group and in my in-person meeting group, and now on the Zoom group that's happening on Wednesday. And I've introduced them to Apollonius's resources, his websites. And I introduced Brandy by name as Know Your Theurgist, which I do periodically for all of you. And I'm putting all her contact things in there. And then the next one's going to be Apollonius because they have his resources. And then Tony, I think I'm going to use this time around. We used Living Hellenismos a while back, years ago. Now I think I'm going to use the Greco-Egyptian Magic book because the other ones I have are too meaty. And this is just like an introduction to a topic. And Clio, I don't know you well enough yet, but your daughter of Hecate, which in Greek, modern Greek is pronounced Ekati. And so there's going to be one on the underworld. And so I think I'll talk to you about that and see how we could, weave in your particular area of expertise. But I'd like to talk to all of you about how you'd optimally like your material to be used. And if you have anything that people who want to, like for instance, with Jean-Louis, he has the Aurum Solis. He has stuff he does under his Theurgia banner. So I could funnel people there if they're interested. So they don't have to go there, but if they want to go there, it's there. And I know you guys well enough to know that you're not going to brainwash people and take their money and do stuff like that. So that's the big, plus. So I'm doing that with some of the cosmic groups also, in addition to our Theurgy group and other groups. But what I also want to do, and then I will pass the mic around so that we can get our contact information, is I'd like to make a short video on Zoom with all of you as like an intro to your stuff. So we're using Brandy's book, for instance. Although we've done shows on For the Love of the Gods, we could kind of revisit it again because you have it now available on Kindle. So give people like a walkthrough and a sampler on how to use the book, an introduction to the book. And I think that'll enhance the instruction. And with Apollonius, I'm going to use his Apollo's Oracle and his Wisdom of Hypatia books, one for Philosophia and the other one for divination. So I'd like to do the same, Apollonius, if you're willing. And then, Tony and Clio, I will talk to you and to Jean-Louis about setting up those things. So think of it like spokes on a wheel. And that's kind of like what I'm building. And anyway, to be continued. And now we have enough time for those who need to leave, for everybody to give the contact information, and we'll go again clockwise in my view, which might be different than anybody else's view. But Tony, can you share your contact information?
Easiest way to contact me is through Facebook, either my personal page or my author page. And I also have a blog on Patheos called Holistic Spirituality.
Thank you very much. Clio, Ajana.
Hi, like Tony, the best way to contact me and fastest would be through Facebook. Just private message me at Clio Ajana. Or you can contact me via the Wild Hunt. I'm up every first weekend of the month. And if you hit, I think it's my picture or the little thing on it, it'll come to me. And I love hearing from people and responding. I never know what people are going to say.
We're going to say thank you very much. You were awesome today. All that you shared. Brandy?
My webpage is brandywilliamsauthor.com. I'm Brandy Williams Author on Facebook and Instagram, although I'm really bad at responding to messages just because of the press of life. So the best way to contact me is like to watch some of these films. And I have a Patheos blog, Star and Snake.
Thank you very much. And Apollonius?
Yes, thank you. The best way to get in touch with me and find out about my material is through my websites, opsopeus.com That's OPSOPAUS.com, and wisdomofhypatia.com. I'm also on Facebook as John Opsapeus, and so you can contact me that way too. But I'm not real good on Facebook, so email is generally a more efficient way to get a hold of me.
And for me, email and Facebook are the best ways. Facebook actually is better because I'm on Facebook a few times a day. Email I check once a day. The other things, you might as well open up a window and talk to the wind. I'm just as likely to get that as check my texts or anything like that. So thank you, everybody. You're incredibly awesome. I enjoyed this very much. And I wish you all well until next we speak. And that goes for you too, dear viewer. Until next time, take care.
Long.